I remember the first time I saw him. Or perhaps I always remembered him. It is difficult to know when the memory begins and reality ends. I was 7 years old. Sitting on the swing in the backyard, my mother calling me in for dinner. I looked up, and he was there. Across the street, a man I had never seen before. Tall, wearing a grey coat that hung loosely from his shoulders. Eyes that felt too heavy for a human face. I blinked, and he was gone. But the memory stayed. I could not shake the feeling that he watched more than the street. He watched me. Years passed. School, friends, birthdays, every photograph, every old home video. Somehow, he appeared, in the corner of the frame. Sitting on a bench I do not remember. Standing near the doorway, always just out of focus, yet always present. At first, I thought it was imagination. A trick of the mind. Then I realized the impossible. He had been there before I could remember anything at all. It became impossible to ignore. Even my earliest memories carried him. Even the ones my parents swore were private, before I spoke or understood. He was there, watching. Last night, I returned to the house I grew up in. It smelled of old wood and dust. The kind of smell that carries 100 forgotten moments. I walked through the hallways. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet. Every step echoed with familiarity and fear. I entered the living room. A photograph of my childhood hung crooked on the wall. I froze. He was there, standing just behind my younger self. Watching. I could not tear my eyes away. A sudden chill filled the room. The air seemed thicker than normal. I shivered. I realized then that I could feel his presence. Not just in memories. Here, now. I tried to speak. My voice failed. The silence became heavy. It pressed against my chest. Against my ribs. Then I saw movement. A shadow, long and thin, along the far wall. Not quite a human shape. Not quite a trick of light. I blinked, and it was gone. The more I moved, the more I felt it. Every corner, every shadow, even the air seemed to bend toward him. I remembered another time, a birthday party when I was 9. Laughter and balloons, and there he was, leaning against the doorway, eyes dark and unreadable. I cannot escape him. He is in every photograph I have ever seen, every old video I watch, every memory I replay in my mind. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, he is closer. Closer than the back of my eyelids should allow. Last night, I touched the photograph in the living room. My hand trembled, and then I noticed something impossible. His eyes moved, just slightly, just enough to know that he was aware. And aware of me. I ran through the hallways of my childhood home. The walls seemed to stretch. The air seemed thicker. Every sound felt amplified. A floorboard creak behind me. A whisper too soft to catch the words. I turned. Nothing. But the feeling did not leave. It never leaves. I reached the stairs. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. And then I saw him at the bottom. Not in the shadows. Not at a distance. He was standing there. Tall. Silent. Waiting. My legs froze. My hands shook. I wanted to run, but the staircase felt like it stretched farther than it should. The house itself seemed to hold me in place. And then I realized the most terrifying truth. I had seen him my entire life. And somehow, he had always been closer than I ever realized. I do not know what he wants. I do not know why he is always there. But last night, I knew one thing for certain. He is not a memory. He is present. And he is patient. The living room seemed darker now. Shadows grew longer. The air grew colder. I could feel him in the corner of my vision. Just beyond what my eyes could see. My hand reached for the doorknob. I wanted to escape. I wanted to leave this house, this life of memories haunted by a stranger. But something held me back. Something unseen. I knew if I turned around, I would see him. Closer than before. Closer than the walls would allow. My chest tightened. I swallowed. The house groaned, and a floorboard creaked from somewhere above. I turned slowly. The room was empty, and yet I knew he was there. Watching. And then the photograph moved. Just slightly. A shift that should have been impossible. I stepped closer. My breath caught in my throat. He smiled. Just faintly. and I knew that I was no longer just looking at memories. I was looking at him. I backed away. My hand shook violently as it brushed the wall. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist toward me. Every memory in my mind screamed with the same realization. He is always here. And last night, I understood that this is only the beginning. I backed away from the photograph. The shadows along the walls seemed to ripple as I moved. The air in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. It was difficult to breathe. Every inhale felt sharp, almost metallic. My eyes darted to the staircase. I knew I could escape through the front door. Yet something anchored me to the living room. A silent pull, like invisible hands tethering me in place. The shadows shifted again. A corner of the room that had always been dark seemed darker still. A figure emerged, not fully formed, just enough to suggest shape. A tall man in a grey coat, the same as in my memories. I froze. My legs felt rooted to the floor. My heart thundered in my chest. Every hair on my body stood upright. The temperature dropped sharply. Cold air flowed around me like fingers, curling against my skin. His face remained hidden in shadow. But I felt his gaze pierce through me. It was not just looking. It was weighing, judging, waiting. I forced my legs to move, step by step toward the front door. The floor creaked under my weight. The sound echoed in the empty house. Too loud, too deliberate. I glanced behind me. He had not moved, not a step. Yet the feeling of him was closer now. Heavy, imposing, impossible to ignore. I reached the door. My hand touched the cold doorknob. The metal was icy, biting against my skin. I pulled. It did not budge. Panic surged. I tried again. Still locked. The front door, which had never locked on its own, now refused to open. I could hear the faint whisper of footsteps behind me. Slow, measured, echoing faintly in the living room. I spun around. The room was empty, but the shadows had grown, stretching toward me from every corner. The air vibrated with tension, thick and tangible. Then I saw it, a photograph on the wall that I had never noticed before. It was my family, smiling, unaware, and yet, in the background, he was there, always there, watching. I realized then that it was not limited to my childhood. He appeared in every photograph of my life, every memory, every fleeting moment captured or forgotten. And now, he had stepped out of memory into the present. I backed toward the staircase. Each step groaned beneath me. The shadows seemed to writhe, stretching along the walls, crawling closer. The temperature dropped further. I could see my breath fog in the cold air. A whisper brushed against my ear. Not a word, not a sound I could comprehend. But it carried a weight, a meaning I could feel deep in my chest. I turned my head slightly. The shadow at the corner of the room moved. Faster this time, gliding rather than walking. I could not see its feet, yet it moved with purpose. My mind raced. Every memory I had of him pressed against me. The first swing in the backyard. The birthday parties. The photographs. The videos. Every memory sharpened, as if they were warning me. I ran up the staircase. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The wooden steps groaned and cracked under my weight. I did not care. I could feel him gaining on me. Not behind me, beside me, inside the very air I breathed. I reached the attic door. I tried to push it open. Locked. The key was gone, or perhaps it had never existed. The shadows in the attic seemed alive, curling around the beams, stretching across the floor. One of them shifted, coalescing into a tall figure. His grey coat, his faceless presence, watching. I stumbled backward, falling against an old trunk. The dust rose in the air, thick and suffocating. My hands clawed at the floor. I tried to pull myself up, but the shadows seemed to hold me down. A whisper floated across my mind. Not through ears, through thoughts, through the spaces between my memories. You cannot leave. You cannot forget. You are mine. I screamed. My voice bounced against the walls, swallowed by the darkness. The figure advanced, step by slow step, a presence that felt heavier than the wooden beams above, more solid than the floor beneath my hands. I scrambled toward the window. It was old. The glass cracked in places. The frame warped with age. I flung myself against it. It held. I could feel him closer. Beneath the floor, above the ceiling, in the walls, in the air. His gaze was inescapable. Then I realized something horrifying. He did not need to touch me. He did not need to speak. He existed wherever I remembered. And every memory I had carried him here. I slumped against the attic wall. My breath came in shallow gasps. I pressed my hands over my ears. Tried to block him out. But I could feel him inside me. Inside my thoughts. A shadow within my own mind. The diary of my own life felt rewritten. Every memory tainted by his presence. Every photograph, every voice, every smile contained him. I forced myself to stand. I could not run. The house was no longer just a building. It was a vessel for him, for his watching, for his patience. And then I saw it. The staircase behind me, where I had come from. The shadows moved in perfect synchrony. They formed a shape. Tall, gray coat, eyes deep and unreadable, waiting. I wanted to flee. I wanted to turn and confront him. I wanted to scream, but my body refused to obey. The last line I remembered from my childhood whispered in my mind. Always there, watching. And I understood. He was not bound by space. He was not bound by time. He was bound to me, to my memory, to every moment I had ever lived. And he was patient. He would always appear, in every memory, in every photograph, in every forgotten corner of my mind. And now, in the present, he had found me completely. I could feel the walls of the attic closing in. The air thickened with every breath. Every shadow stretched toward me. My vision blurred. He stepped forward, closer than any human should be able to step. Closer than the space allowed. And yet he did not move his legs. My mind raced. 100 years of memories flashed before me. All the times he had appeared. All the times I had ignored him. All the times I had pretended he did not exist. I realized then that this was no longer about memory. This was about presence. This was about him, and I had no choice but to face it. I took a step forward. My hands trembling violently. The shadows seemed to quiver. The air hummed with anticipation. And then I saw my own reflection. In the old mirror leaning against the wall. I was there, and behind me, he appeared. Closer, closer than I had ever imagined. And smiling faintly. I wanted to turn. I wanted to run. I wanted to fight. But I knew in that moment that every step I had taken, every memory I had led me here. To him, to the stranger who had existed in every memory I had ever had. I stood frozen in front of the mirror. The stranger was there, yet somehow different. Not menacing, not advancing, just waiting. Watching. For a long moment, I could not breathe. The attic was still. Even the shadows seemed to pause. Then I noticed something. He mirrored my every movement. Not perfectly, but almost. If I tilted my head, he tilted his. If I took a step back, he stepped back. A strange calm began to seep into my chest. As if understanding replaced fear. He had been part of me all along. Every memory, every photograph, every fleeting glimpse had shaped me. And he was not an intruder. He was a reflection. I swallowed hard. I realized I could not fight him. I could not chase him away. He belonged to me, and I belonged to him. Slowly, I lowered my arms. I stopped running. I stopped struggling. And I watched him. The figure in gray, faceless yet familiar. The attic air softened. The shadows receded slightly, folding back into corners. The weight on my chest lifted. It was still there, but lighter, less oppressive. I reached out a hand, almost instinctively. He did the same. Not touching, not merging, just acknowledging. A silent truce. I stepped back from the mirror. He remained in place. And I knew, finally, that he would never leave. But neither would he harm me. The attic no longer felt hostile. The house no longer seemed to press in. The memories that had haunted me felt less like warnings and more like lessons. All the moments in my life, the joys and fears, had always contained him. And now I understood. I walked toward the staircase. The front door was unlocked. The night air smelled of rain and earth, fresh and welcoming. I stepped outside. The stranger remained in the attic. Watching, waiting. But he was no longer a terror. He was part of me. A shadow of memory, a witness, a reminder. I breathed deeply. The fear had not vanished entirely. Perhaps it never would, but I had faced him. And for the first time, I felt a strange peace. The stranger will appear in every memory I have. And I will see him. Not as an enemy, not as a threat, but as a part of the story of my life. I turned away from the house. The night was quiet. The stars were cold and distant. And I walked forward, carrying every memory, every shadow, and every lesson with me. The stranger remains, always watching, always present, and I am no longer afraid.